Wow. Thank you, Angie. And Angie, the reason I watch Global is Anthony Farnell. We've been dressing him for about a year.
You dress him well, my friend.
I know he does. You know, I have to say something. The gentleman sitting at my table said to me, why don't you write a book? I don't know. I don't really want to write a book because I think everybody knows too much about me now. Thank you again, Angie, member of the Toronto Board of Trade, fellow honorees and guests. I must admit that I'm standing here today somewhat overwhelmed. When I received the call saying that I've been selected as the winner of the 2015 Business Leader of the Year Award, I was surprised and very humbled. I've been very fortunate. My family came to Toronto from Rouen, Noranda, Quebec in the 1950s. I have only a grade 10 education, but I have three strengths. I love the menswear industry and truly enjoy helping men dress the best for their body type. But before I go on further, I have a story. The reason I left Rouen, Noranda, I was in the theater business. I managed a theater at the age of 17, told them I was 19. I moved to Toronto because being Jewish, I was going out with a French-Canadian girl. My daughter-in-law is sitting here. She's going to hear lots of stories, Sharon, that you don't know about. And my son's sitting there too. And I came here because my parents wanted me to find a Jewish girl, and I left this girl. She didn't want to switch to become Jewish, and I wasn't going to switch to become Catholic. And I went to work at a theater called the Shays Theater on Bay Street. Does anybody remember that? And they made me assistant manager. And one day the manager gave me an order, and I told him to F.O. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. I was a cocky kid. So then I decided I was going to go back, and I hated the retail men's clothing business. Hated it. My father had a store in Rouen, Noranda, in Rouen. And as a kid, I had to take him lunch across the lake. And if you know, Rouen's the same weather as Winnipeg. Had to wear earmuffs, but I just hated the business. So now I can't go back. She found a new boyfriend. So I got to do something. So my brother Jack, who's no longer with us, says, why don't you go and work in a men's clothing store? I said, men's clothing? No, I like show business better. Anyway, they convinced me to go to a store. I worked at 161 Danforth. I knew nothing. I hated menswear. So I kept calling for advice. And the next thing I know, my dad moved here because he didn't want me to come back to Rouen, Noranda, opened a store at 1478 Danforth. And I went to work for my dad. And I still hated the clothing business. Then I got married to a Jewish girl, and Dialects had a store on Danforth Avenue. They took over Tip Tops, Kay and Poslam, and I knew they wanted to get out of that store at 613 Danforth. Have no money, and I went to see them down in the office, and I said to them, I'll take over the store, but I have no money. They gave me 6 months free rent, and I took over a store at 613 Danforth. I changed the name, and I didn't know what to call it yet. And I'm standing on a ladder, I can remember like today, trying to fix it up. And this gentleman came in by the name of Earl Antler, who was the bank manager of Bank of Nova Scotia. Sorry about that, RBC. And he said to me, he says, where do you bank? I said, well, I don't bank anywhere. I said, I work for my dad. He banked at CIBC. Oh, RBC is going to really be mad at me tonight. And I says, but can I come and talk to you? Anyway, I went to his office, and I convinced him to lend me $10,000. Still a salesman a little bit. He gave me the money. And then I went to my father, and I said, Dad, I says, I'm leaving, I'm going to open my own store. I'm getting married. And he says, take over this store. I said, Dad, no. Anyway, I brought an accountant in. Anybody remember Willie Wonderful? All right, so the gentleman name that owned that was Jack Howard, still alive. We took inventory. My dad had $14,000 worth of inventory and owed $70,000. So he was really bankrupt. So I said to my dad, I said, Dad, I'll make a settlement for you. My dad banged the table and says, Kormans don't make settlements. You'll take it over and you'll pay the bills. Now, in the old days, there was such thing as notes. You could write a check on a Monday. It wouldn't clear for 2 weeks. But he knew every trick. I didn't know those tricks. Now I took it over. And I gave him a job for life. I made him president of the company. He didn't know anything, but I respected him. And All of a sudden, I owe a lot of money and I'm in trouble. So now I got to go to work. So I learned how to use the work at the banks. And then one day, I get a call from CIBC to come to Tubler Street. And I walk into Tubler Street with my accountant. He won't see me with my accountant. So I walk in and the guy comes out, member bank manager, I won't give you his name, and he says, "My God, it's Saul Korman. I listen to you every day, Music of Your Life," which is now 590 The Fan. "Look who we got here. We got Saul Korman here. Wow." Introduced me to secretary. Good. Now I go to the big boardroom. He says, "Saul, can you project what you're going to lose for next year?" I'm listening to this. Project what I'm going to lose. Okay. Come back in 2 weeks with your accountant. And so I go back to the store with my accountant. I says, "How do we project what we're going to lose?" He says, "Well, let's come back and we'll tell them we're going to lose 20,000. Now I come back to the bank. At that time, into the bank for $180,000, by the way. Come back to the bank, and now I got to wait a half hour. It's no longer Saul Korman is here. Now the guy calls me in, and there's a guy sitting, remember, with a vest, he's typing. In those days, I don't know, taking notes. He's all right. He says, "How's Mrs. Korman's Jaguar?" I said, "I beg your pardon?" He said, "How is her car?" It's all right, let me be blunt. You've taken it all out, now you're going to put it in. We're not going to supply it, you got to pay off this loan. I took the keys and I threw it at him. So, well, my accountant went and picked up the keys. I went back to the store, I said, "What the hell did you pick up the keys for? Let them have it." "Hey, they're only going to take your house away. You better start working it." So that bank manager did me a favor. He taught me something, how to be a businessman. Stop living the good life. Start analyzing what you're doing. I have here today my son, who's going to take over the business, my daughter-in-law, his wife, Sharon, and a young lady here, Sue Graham Nutter, has been with me 20 years. And I learned how to use the media and do PR. But I didn't learn it easily. Now, I'm on Danforth Avenue, 613. All the retail shops around me are closing. Everybody's going. We had a Jack Fraser's. We had everything. All the used car lots are still there. And here I am trying to make a living on Danforth. And Danforth, the only thing that was there was car lots. Then all of a sudden, the Greek community came to Danforth, and they opened restaurants, and Danforth got a little trendier. And I remember sitting in front of my store many Saturdays, no business, and I belonged to a club called Tribell. It's now Richmond Hill Country Club, and people would be coming by. They were all going to the racetrack. And then all of a sudden, Danforth became a trendier area. And I started making it work. But that's not what built my business. I get a call one day from a gentleman that he wants me to do clothes for a guy by the name of John Gilbert. Does anybody remember John Gilbert? He used to be on, oh boy, we've got people as old as me nearly here. And they want me to do clothes for him, and he says he's a size 48 with a 42 waist. I went up in those days to 46. Now I go to 54. And I said to the guy that called me to do wardrobe, tell him to go to Vic Tanny's and lose weight. Anyway, I went and got him some clothes. And the guy, he comes to me after, he says, "Go to Vic Tanny's." I said, "Who told you that?" They went and told him. Anyway, so John Gilbert came to the store with his wife and kids, and I sold him a couple of suits, and he delivered them about 3 weeks later, and I went to Montreal on the ship, and I get a phone call, I can remember, on a Tuesday at 4 o'clock from the store to call John Gilbert's producer. I don't know what John Gilbert, I knew he did a radio show, but I had no clue that he did a 2-hour talk show. So he says to me, call the producer, says, "There's a flight leaving at 9 o'clock. We want you to be on the air at 9 o'clock at Chum. We're at Yonge, just below St. Clair." I did that 2-hour talk show, and that taught me the clothing business. The same questions I was asked then, I'm asked today. And I said, holy God, this is going to work. I developed wardrobe analysis, which I used to do. I don't do it anymore because I became too busy to do it. Sean, we should go back to it because it does work. And what wardrobe analysis is, so you understand, is that when you come in to buy a suit, in those days, I would ask you what you needed the suit for, what's your lifestyle, what's your wardrobe. And one of the instances I remember the best is had a Mr. Smith come in, and his name is Mr. Smith, and he says, "I live in Toronto, and I have a home in Phoenix. So I travel. So I want clothes that I can take with me, not too heavyweight and everything. And I'm colorblind. So we sold him $10,000 worth of clothes, which was a big sale. And the only thing he bought was white shirts. And most people didn't realize Jack Nicklaus is also colorblind, and they had to label his clothes for golf. So we labeled shirt to go with this. We didn't label the shirts because they were all white. So after delivering the clothes, I get a phone call from Mrs. Smith. She'd like to come and talk to me. They're not happy. And I was still struggling. So, holy God, I have to give them back 10 grand. I said, what's the problem? They said, you didn't label the white shirts. You didn't label the shirts. You never said white. So I went to a girl that was working with me. I said, we got to label the shirts. Why? They're all white. Label the shirts, which I did. So this is what you learn about what goes on in the business. Retail is not an easy target today. Now, some people, gentleman up there said to me, when am I going to write a book? You're going to hear the book right now, so I don't have to write it. Danforth Avenue, no retail. They're all gone. The car lots are closing. We're now getting restaurants. People are coming to the street to eat. So now I says, holy God, after doing the John Gilbert show, I bought time on radio. The first station I bought was called 1430. It was Foster Hewitt's radio station, and I bought it, and I started doing commercials. I had a girl that did copyright, handed me commercials, and I was probably the worst commercials you would ever hear on radio, because I'm not a good reader. If you notice, I'm trying not to read. I'm a better talker than reading. And Andy Berry, we went to a studio on Dundas. Andy Berry was the host of that radio show in the morning, and they refused to play my commercials. And Andy came to me and he says, when do you get your script? I said, well, she just came in and handed it to me now. I said, you don't study it or analyze it or nothing? He says, no. He says, I do Pascal Furniture, who's no longer, and I study him for a day before I do, and I'm supposed to be a pro. He says, come in the studio. So we went to his Claude Deschamps studio. In those days, they used to tape it all together. Not today, it's much more sophisticated. He says, what do you do for a living? And he kept asking me questions. So did anybody remember the name Ron Hewitt that did the 3 Stars? Who worked for CFRB? Did any of you remember that? Anyway, I called Ron. I said, Ron, you're going to do commercials with me. So we did 60 seconds, and he would talk. And the next thing I know I think about 4 months before the copyright came to me and handed me a clock. He says, you're on your own. Go do them. So now, what did I learn from that? You got to make the commercial interesting. You got to make it exciting. Everybody sells suits. I'm good at what we do. My son is good. But we're no different than Rosen's. Rosen's a great store. And when I tell people that the best value in the clothing industry is Moores, they all look at me. I wouldn't wear a Moore suit, but it is good value. I also don't shop at Walmart, but it's also good value. But you got to create a feeling of people wanting to shop with you. So what I've developed, which I'm trying to get my son Sean starting to do it too, people want to shop with Saul. They want to meet Saul. I'm a personality. Sat down at the table. Somebody hears my voice. Are you Saul? I hear you. I'm glad that they like to hear my voice, but hey guys, come in and buy some clothes. That's what I'm here for. Then I get a phone call one day from one of my suppliers, who I'm still not out of the woods. I owe money still. I'm still not out from that debt. And he invites me into Montreal and tells me, A. Golden Son, I don't know if you know them, they used to be quite a big chain in Montreal, are doing 2-for-1 suits. You should go look at it. So I went to look at it, and I never was inexpensive, even then. So then I decided I wasn't going to do 2-for-1. My cheapest suit at that time was about $6.95. I decided to try a suit for $4.95 and advertised it. And holy God, it started to sell. And that's when I came up with the Roberto label, which is a private label in my store, all made in Canada. And it is the best value in Canada. I squeeze my manufacturers by and they keep doing it. And that Roberto pulls me out of the hole. I carry Boss, Canale, all the labels. But retailing is not easy. It's a difficult business. And I admire the young entrepreneurs that come here and accept awards. I'm 80 years old, and I still work 6 days a week. And I have 2 boys that are good boys, and they work too. We all work. I have so many stories. How many of you heard me from St. Martin? Anybody remember hearing me talk about St. Martin? I've met so many great people on my way up here. I remember I told the story at the table, I'll tell it again. I get a call about 4 years ago from a gentleman named Stephen Hunter. I don't know who Stephen Hunter is. I do now. I want to see, he comes to my store and he sits down. He says, I just spent $1 million kicking air transit of the Maho and the Great Bow Hotel in St. Martin, and I need your help. So I says, what do you do? He says, I'm the president of Sunwing Airlines. He said, you're of us? Not really. And I didn't. Now they're having so much. I said, well, what do you want me to do? He said, well, why did you do it? He said, well, my wife, I have 2 children. I married an Italian girl. I presume before she got married with me, she had a boyfriend that loved St. Martin. I don't know, but so I bought it, and I got to make it work. So you're going to make it work with me. And I do. I helped him, still help him. I haven't been there in 2 years. But when I went to him on my 60th anniversary and asking him for what I could do at his office, he gave me 6 trips to give away, 6. And he also gave me a trip to Italy to visit Canelli, and Canelli refused to have them there. I don't know why, but he did give it. So you build relationships. Everything you do in life is relationships, everything. I believe that when you buy from me, I'm the best. And I have a lot of competition. I love my industry. I love my business. And I love the thought of you people asking me if your tie is correct. There's one thing I want you all to do. If you're going to go buy a tie, buy this one. Prostate cancer tie. I'm a survivor. And by the way, I carry them and I make no money on them, so you can still come and buy them. But you can buy it in most stores, and they also have socks. You got to give to your community. Let's go back to my community. Sue Graham Nutter, who's been with me, remembers us 6 people. 6. Was it 6, Sue? Or sitting on the corner, where were you? Just before Carlo, right? Planning the Taste of the Danforth. 6 people. Somebody went to Chicago, saw it done in Chicago, and we're going to do it. And I says, well, at that time, I'm advertising in about 4 or 5 radio stations. I said, I know I can get the radio station to start promoting it. And anyway, we went to, which beer company? O'Keefe, then it was? Molson's. Went to Molson, they gave us their big truck. We got food baskets from Crino's Food. Went to every radio stations promoting, and they started talking. I think we had 1.3 million last year. Sue's no longer involved. I'm no longer involved. I still talk about 1.3 million people on that street. It is the biggest event in North America, by the way. It's bigger than anything that happens. And we're in Greektown, but we're really not as Greektown as we used to be. I mean, we got a lot of Asian foods, we got everything. But it's a great street, and they are great, great people. And what else can I tell you about myself? I love entertaining, so if you want me to get out of here, how long do I have left? Let's talk a little bit about Mel Lastman. Mel Lastman came to Taste of the Danforth. I was emceeing the event. I was still active. And I introduced the mayor, Mel Lastman, and they introduced me to come up to introduce Mayor Mel Lastman. They called me the mayor. And Mel got up, he says, there's only one mayor in this city. You're now the Duke. So I became a Duke. I think I like mayor better. Most important thing to all of you, support your local retailer. Try to buy Canadian. Stop buying offshore. I built my whole business trying to stay away from offshore. I don't mind Italian because they make good products, but we got to keep Canadian workers. And if we don't, our whole industry is gone. We have 3 manufacturers left, and we're to blame because we don't look at labels. Start looking at labels. Shop Canadian. Can you remember that? Canada makes good suits, good shirts, good ties. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for letting me spill my heart out. I haven't got the whole book done yet, young man. I'll finish the rest, the next chapter. Thanks for having me.